The great hall of Blackthorn Castle was filled with light and laughter on the night everything changed. Golden banners hung from the ceiling, and the smell of roasted meat and sweet wine drifted through the crowd. Alpha King Draven Ashwood stood at the head of the room, tall and proud, his dark eyes scanning the guests who had gathered to celebrate his return from the Northern Territories. Beside him stood a woman no one recognized. She was beautiful, dressed in silver silk, with a confident smile that suggested she already believed she belonged there. Her name was Serenity Voss, the daughter of a powerful alpha family from the Silver Moon Pack. At the back of the hall, half hidden by a stone pillar, stood Wren Calloway. She wore a plain gray dress, far simpler than the gowns worn by the other women in the room. 3 years ago, she had become Draven's mate, chosen by fate rather than by his heart. She had worn the title of Luna, but never the respect that should have come with it. The court whispered about her weakness. Draven barely looked at her, and yet she had stayed. Tonight, she watched him lift a hand and call for silence. "I have an announcement," Draven said, his voice carrying across the hall. "Alpha Serenity Voss will become the new Luna of Blackthorn." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Wren felt her heart drop, though she had already guessed what was coming. She had seen the way Draven looked at Serenity during their meetings, the way his guard had begun avoiding her own quarters, the way his mother had stopped even pretending to be kind. Draven's gaze finally found Wren across the room. There was no warmth in it, only cold decision. "Wren Calloway is no longer my Luna," he said. "She never truly belonged in this position. From this night forward, she has no title, no rank, and no place at my side." The words landed like stones. A few nobles laughed quietly behind their hands. Others simply watched, curious to see how the rejected Omega would react. Everyone expected tears. Everyone expected her to fall to her knees and beg for mercy, as Omegas were often taught to do. Instead, Wren straightened her back, walked forward through the parting crowd, and stopped a few steps from the king. She bowed low, the way tradition required. "Thank you," she said clearly, so the whole hall could hear, "for finally setting me free." Then she turned and walked out of the hall without looking back. Draven frowned, unsettled by her calm. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself he felt nothing. But somewhere deep in his chest, the mate bond he had spent 3 years trying to silence gave a small, sharp pull, like a warning he refused to hear. That night, while the castle celebrated, Wren moved quickly and quietly. She did not cry. She did not pack years of memories into a single bag. She had been preparing for this moment for a long time, though no one in the castle had ever suspected it. 3 years earlier, before she was forced into the mate bond with Draven, Wren had spent time secretly training with a small group of wolves in the northern woods, far from the eyes of any royal court. She learned to fight, she learned to track, she learned to hide her strength, because an Omega who showed power was seen as a threat, and threats were dealt with harshly. When fate bound her to Draven, she made a choice. She would stay, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she wanted to understand the kingdom from the inside. Over 3 years, while the court dismissed her as weak and unimportant, Wren had quietly gathered proof of corruption within Draven's own council. She found records of stolen war funds. She found evidence that some council members were secretly involved in the trafficking of Omegas, taken from smaller, conquered packs. She kept this knowledge hidden, waiting for the right moment. The night of her rejection was that moment. While the castle slept off its celebration, Wren slipped into the council archive with the help of 3 loyal guards, wolves who had quietly sworn themselves to her over the years, sensing her true character long before anyone else did. Together, they removed the hidden files, the ones proving years of secret crimes. By the time the sun rose over Blackthorn Castle, Wren Calloway was gone. Her scent vanished at the northern border, as if she had never existed. Her rooms were empty, her guards were missing. And the locked archive, meant to hold the kingdom's darkest secrets, stood open and bare. Draven woke to chaos. Servants ran through the halls in a panic. Council members shouted over one another, demanding to know who had broken into the archive. Serenity, who had expected to wake up as the celebrated new Luna, instead found herself standing in the middle of a scandal, her coronation forgotten in the noise. But it was not the missing files that struck Draven the hardest. It was the strange, hollow ache spreading through his chest, an ache that grew worse with every passing hour. For 3 years, he had pushed the mate bond aside, telling himself it meant nothing, that he did not need it. He had believed that rejecting Ren would simply end the connection between them. He was wrong. Rejection did not erase a bond, it only wounded it. And now, with Ren truly gone, the bond he had ignored for so long was screaming inside him, demanding to know where she was, why she was not near him, why the distance felt like something was being torn away. He sent search parties in every direction. Trackers scoured the forests. Messages were sent to allied packs, asking if anyone had seen the former Luna of Blackthorn. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was nothing. It was as though Ren Calloway had simply stopped existing. Meanwhile, whispers began to spread through the wider werewolf world. Stories of a masked figure moving through the northern territories, breaking apart criminal networks that trafficked Omegas from weaker packs. Stories of corrupt alphas suddenly losing their power overnight, their crimes exposed to rival packs and neutral councils alike. No one knew who this masked leader was. Some called her a hero, others called her a dangerous rebel, but everyone agreed she was building something powerful, and she was doing it without any Alpha King standing beside her. Back at Blackthorn, the kingdom Draven had once ruled with confidence began to crumble. Word of the corruption Ren had exposed reached neighboring packs, and one by one, they withdrew their support and their trade agreements. Alliances that had taken years to build fell apart in months. Serenity, seeing the writing on the wall, quietly ended her arrangement with Draven and returned to her own pack, unwilling to be tied to a king whose court was collapsing. The council, once united in greed, turned against itself, each member trying to blame the others for the crimes that had been uncovered. Draven found himself alone in a castle that had once been full of noise and celebration, now filled only with silence and suspicion. Yet none of it compared to the emptiness inside him. He barely slept, he barely ate. He kept remembering the calm look on Ren's face the night he rejected her, the way she had thanked him instead of breaking down, the way she had walked away without a single tear. He had mistaken her calmness for weakness. Now he understood it had never been weakness at all. It had been strength he was too blind to see. Determined to find answers, Draven began following the trail of the masked leader himself, traveling through 3 different territories, speaking with pack leaders who had been helped by her, and following rumors that grew clearer the further north he went. Each story he heard painted the same picture: a fierce, intelligent leader who protected the weak, punished the corrupt, and asked for nothing in return except loyalty freely given. Slowly, painfully, Draven began to realize who this leader might be. He finally reached a small settlement near the northern border, a quiet village built into the hills, protected by wolves who watched him with sharp, careful eyes as he approached. He asked to see their leader, and after a long, tense wait, he was led into a modest wooden hall. There, standing at the center of the room, was Ren. She looked different than he remembered, not older, exactly, but stronger, steadier, as though she had finally grown into a version of herself she had always kept hidden. She wore simple clothing, nothing like the silks of the royal court, yet she carried herself with more authority than he had ever seen in his own council chamber. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You found me," Ren finally said, her voice calm, without anger, but without warmth either. "I searched for months," Draven admitted. "I did not know where else to look." "You did not need to look," she replied. "You needed to understand." Draven lowered his gaze. "I understand now. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. I let pride and old prejudice decide who you were, instead of actually seeing you." Ren studied him for a long moment. She did not rush to forgive him, and she did not pretend that his words erased 3 years of coldness and public humiliation. "You rejected me in front of your entire court," she said. "You told me I did not belong beside a king. I believed, for a long time, that maybe you were right, that maybe I truly was less than the others around me. It took me a long time to understand that the problem was never me. It was the value you placed on titles instead of character." "I know," Draven said quietly. "I cannot undo what I did. I do not expect you to forget it." "I have not forgotten it," Ren said, "but I am no longer the same woman who once needed your approval to feel worthy of respect. I built this place with the people who chose to stand beside me, not because a bond forced them to, but because they trusted who I am. I do not need a crown to matter." Draven felt the weight of her words settle over him, heavier than any political defeat he had faced in recent months. "Then what do you need from me?" he asked, "if anything at all?" Ren was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly, rather than answering out of habit or old duty. "I do not know if I need anything from you," she said. "But if you truly wish to prove that you have changed, you will not do it with words in this room. You will do it through actions, over time, without expecting anything from me in return." "And if I do?" Draven asked. "If I spend that time proving it?" "Then we will see," Ren said simply. "Not everything broken can be fixed, but not everything is beyond repair either. The difference will depend on you, not on me." Draven nodded slowly, understanding that this was not forgiveness, and it was not a promise of reconciliation. It was, at most, a door left slightly open, one he would have to earn his way through with patience and honesty, not entitlement. He left the settlement that day without her, but not without purpose. He returned to Blackthorn and began the long, difficult work of rebuilding his kingdom, not through the strength of his title, but through fair decisions, honest leadership, and a willingness to listen to those he had once dismissed. He removed the corrupt members of his council. He worked to repair the alliances that had been broken. He learned, slowly, what it meant to lead with humility instead of pride. Ren, meanwhile, continued to grow the community she had built, a place where Omegas were respected rather than hidden, where strength was welcomed rather than feared. Her name became known not as the rejected Luna of Blackthorn, but as a leader in her own right, someone who had turned pain into purpose. Months passed. Occasionally, word would reach her of the changes happening within Draven's kingdom, of a king who had begun to rule differently than before. She did not know yet what she would decide about her own future, or whether their paths would ever truly meet again in the way they once had. But for the first time since the bond had chosen her, she was not waiting for anyone's permission to live her life fully. Whatever happened next between them, one truth remained clear. The woman he had once rejected in front of an entire court had not disappeared into nothing, as he believed she would. She had disappeared only long enough to become exactly who she was always meant to be,